Okay, hi everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for waiting for us while we just kind of got all the technicalities sorted. My name is Ntombentle Shezi, and I am really excited to be in conversation with a few really interesting practitioners. Today we'll be thinking about spirituality, social practice, and social justice. And when I first was introduced to the different members of the panel by Mike, it was interesting because it felt like people are doing quite different things. So why are we being brought together? But as we started sort of like talking and sort of like, I would listen a little bit to people's thoughts or just read about them, it's quite clear that so much is connected. So today we will be thinking about the intersection of law, art, performance, ancestral technologies, ecology, and activism. These disciplines on the surface may seem distinct, but in reality, everything is intertwined when we're thinking about justice, healing, and transformation, which we deeply need. As we reflect, whether we are reflecting on the past or our present or our future, we are constantly confronted by questions around how do we honor memory while imagining radical futures? How do we navigate the complex intersections of ecological destruction, systemic injustice, and spiritual renewal? And what possibilities emerge when we listen, not just to hear our human voices, but when we truly listen to everything that is around us? Whether it is carried in land, in the water, in ancestral consciousness, we can listen a bit more deeply. At a time when environmental collapse is no longer a distant warning, but our lived reality, when social justice continues to shape our world, and when institutions fail those they claim to serve, we need to think about a new framework, something a little bit unconventional in moving forward. This panel brings together thinkers and practitioners who challenge disciplinary boundaries, who insist on listening to what has been silenced, and who offer ways of knowing and being that are both ancient and radical. From the lawyer who will explore how the law can shift from being a tool of human exceptionalism to one that recognizes the rights of non-human beings, the non-human, to a lawyer who is dedicated to social justice, but also the justice of students. We think about South Africa and this brilliant constitution we have, but we are still entangled in so many harmful historic legacies. So the next lawyer will be talking to us about social justice and student debt. What can we do about the student debt crisis? We will also then go into some performances. We'll have some performances into the world of embodied storytelling and soundscapes. Through poetry and instrumentals, we are reminded that sound is not just an artistic practice, but a form of resistance, a vessel for history, and a language of connection. Sound as a living technology will be explored as a portal to ancestral consciousness and a form of attunement to the world around us. I will not get into all the bios. The bios are very brilliant, but you can go and look and read everyone's bios under the talk program tab on the website, just because of time, but you can also talk to everyone else after this panel. So please help me in welcoming Kanyisa, Sister Za, Philip, and Thembaletu. They will present their work to us, work that is quite different, and then I'll come back and I'll start to facilitate some conversations between us and the different practitioners. Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
Queen. Molweni. Ninjani namhlanje? Camagu siyaphila nathi Nkosi. Igama ngusisonke wakwaPhaphu. Ndisuka kwilali ekuthiwa kuKwaPain Omtsha eMthatha. Camagu. Isiduko sam nguMadiba uyemyem ungqolomsila uvela bembhentsela uzondwa zintshaba zingazumenzanto. Umama ondizalayo ngumangcobo, untonto, nguthekela, ngumashiya amahle, ngumbiza sicule bububalo. Umama ozala umama wam nguMarhadebe, umthi mkhulu, undlebe entle zombini. Umama ozala utata wam nguMasukude, umfazi obeli linye, uncancisela phesheya komlanjana. For us, it is essential that before even one begins to utter their name, they must acknowledge where they come from. They must acknowledge those who came before them. In Isintu, we have this understanding that what makes a being is plurality, meaning that what makes this composite being is both the maternal and the paternal aspect coming together. And therefore, in these two strands, there is information that moves. There is knowledge that moves in the blood, in the DNA. And this information, as the lineage progresses, it complexifies. Before we continue with the message we've been sent by Abantu Abadala to share in this space, we'd just like for us to take a collective breath. It's been a long day, and also other people just came out of another panel. Maybe other people are still traveling and haven't quite yet arrived in this here now time space that we're all occupying. So if you can, kindly, we'd just like to ask to take your right hand and put it on your heart. And if you're able, just to try to make sure that your spine is sitting erect and you're comfortable in the chair. Both your feet on the ground, and you can feel the connection. That in this moment you're connected. That in this moment there is no separation. And simply tuning into the vibration of the heart, listening to your breath, just allow yourself to close your eyes. And as you're feeling this breath in your body, in this moment, allow the breath to move through this whole room and allow it to connect with the breath of all beings that are here. And now that our breath is one, let us extend this breath into this geography we're in, this region of Stellenbosch. And while we're extending our breath, connecting with the breath of all things, all the plants, the stones, the animals, the rivers, the mountains, the clouds, and extending beyond the atmosphere into the sky, into the stars, into the orbits of planets, and sit with this cosmic breath in you in this moment and recognize the connection in all things. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes again. Kamaku. Thank you all. Oh, see, I hear someone sighing there. Thank you for releasing that sigh. Perhaps then our conversation will begin here. Many years ago, and perhaps the year was 2012, we were very deep in the space of computing sciences, information technology. And while I was in this space of study, I was very fascinated by artificial intelligence, but also the possibility of computing technologies for us, particularly here in the African continent, and what these computing technologies can do for us in our communities. But during this time of inquiry, I had, maybe I was too young at the time, other people termed it a midlife crisis, where I felt very confused. I was like, hey, is this really what I want to do with the rest of my life? And in this moment of listening as to why did I come here, what is it that I'm actually here to do, something within me spoke that said, if you really want to know, then you must connect directly to the source. And many years later, for the sake of time, I decided to drop out from the IT space because I could not see myself continuing for the rest of my life, mapping the zeros and the ones. Something in me said I must open my heart. If I really want to live, I must find a way of opening my heart. So since 2013 till 2018, I've been in this process of trying to understand who am I, what speaks to me, what speaks through me, what is really the essence that drives me as a being, as an entity. Not only just as someone who's called Sisonke, who comes from this particular lineage, but what do I as a soul feel I came here to do? We come from a polygamous family, and I've also been quite privileged to grow up in a homestead that acknowledges both African cosmology and, we would say now, Western worldviews, in the sense that our connection to this understanding of a supreme being or the divine at first came through very strongly via the Christian lens, but also there was a very deep rootedness in the earth, in tradition, in ritual, in ceremony. These not only as arbitrary things, but as technologies. Technologies that are able to assist the growth and the ascension of souls while in the physical body. This device you're seeing here in front of you, interfacing with you, other people call it the body. In isiXhosa, we call it umzimba. Umzimba as a word is compound, meaning that umzi and mba, or imba. The word umzi means a home or a house or a vessel. But when you change the tonality of the word, you get the word umzi. Umzi now refers to the reeds. And when you listen deeper into our cosmology, you'll understand that we actually emerged from the waters. We are the people of the reeds. So before we became terrestrial beings, we were aquatic beings. And now to the second component of this word, mba. Mba means to close or to be enclosed, but it is also that which sounds. Ivaleke mba, it is sealed shut. And in the past few months, I've been really privileged to be able to interface with different people who speak different African languages. And please, we are open to being guided in this space as well. We've learned that in Shona, imba means song. And when you go further into the Eastern African region, yimba means sing, or kosi. And also, this word is a root of this understanding of what the human body is. So, in our cosmology, we understand that this is not only just a body, but in itself, it is a resonation chamber. It is a site for resonance. What is this resonance? We call it umoya, or we call it umphefumlo. That within the body dwells an entity, or a soul, or a spirit. The word for breath is umphefumlo, but also the same word umphefumlo can be used to speak of the soul. So the act of breathing isn't only just a breathing, it is essentially an ensouling. It is us drawing in the cosmic primal life force and anchoring it into a focal point which we call a human body. And therefore, consciousness is able to move and to flow in that way. This is why when we say umntu uyaphefumla or uyaphila, we mean that they are not only just breathing, but they're also alive, or there is an enlivening happening in their system. And once the breath or the spirit or the soul leaves the physical body, we say now umntu uswelekile. Ukusweleka as they are being missed or they are no longer there, or meaning that now the soul has transitioned from this anchor or from this locality into another space, into another plane, into another realm. And this is very vital as a primal understanding of who we actually are as beings and as entities. That we are essentially divine beings. And the spirit and this breath that lives in us lives in all things, and therefore is connected through all times and all space. During this time that we characterized as a midlife crisis, in our cosmology, we would understand it as ingulo. Kuthiwa lo mntwana uyagula. Ukugula, in this sense, speaks not to a sickness per se, but it speaks to a spiritual affliction. That through this being, there is something that wants to emerge. There is something that wants to grow and blossom, but it doesn't have a channel to be able to do that. And this is something that we can characterize for all of us in this place. That as we grow in this life, or at least in the machination and design of the life that we live, because this reality we think is reality is not the only reality. There are many other realities. And even for me to be transmitting this message in this particular language means I'm weaving in a particular reality. Kodwa xa nditshintsha ulwimi lwam ndiqala uthetha ngesiXhosa, ndithi thina singabantu apha emzimbeni akuphili umoya omnye, kuphila imimoya. Already now I'm moving in a different reality. I'm moving in a different understanding of what this creation is. So language is not arbitrary. Language becomes the tool that is able to work with the finer particles of the reality and orders them, and therefore reality can be able to flow. This we encapsulate in a very beautiful maxim that says, umlomo uyadala. What you speak comes into creation. How does it come to creation? It is the breath, or it is the soul inside the body, moving through the design of the vocal cords, interfacing with the subtle elements, making things possible. So everything we say has power. To continue, while I was in this space of seeking or searching or trying to understand who I am and why I am here, we finally had to surrender to information that has been moving in my bloodline for centuries. And this information is what is known as ubugqirha. In 2018, finally, after exploring many studies and many things and teaching in universities, I felt as though I'd reached a threshold, that there's a limitation where my consciousness can't go because my mind has been disciplined in a very particular way. And I needed to find a way to unlearn and to deprogram, or to shift my awareness from my mind and into my heart. And when I finally surrendered to the call to become igqirha, my ancestors gave me the name Khanyisa. Khanyisa means the one who must bring light. It is an instruction. It is not only just a name. What is ubugqirha? Very briefly. When the colonial intrusion, and I prefer to call it an intrusion than anything else, when it happened and some of the first settlers saw some of amagqirha, they were called witch doctors, or other people misnamed them for the lack of understanding what the reality was, what was the consciousness moving in that space, or because they came from a different reality, this reality did not quite match. And this is probably a wound that even our country hasn't even begun to address. The suppression of the indigenous African consciousness, how we see and understand what reality is, and therefore how reality flows. So igqirha, when the doctors, the medical doctors started coming, they were like, oh, what are these people doing? We're like, we're doing the same thing here. So you are doctors essentially, but because what you're doing is strange, you are witch doctors. But essentially, that could be further from the truth. Today, what is called the medical doctor in our language is called ugqirha. Ugqirha and igqirha are two completely different things. Ugqirha only works with the physical material body through diagnosis, through pharmaceuticals. But igqirha is connected to cosmic law. Their intention is to bring about restoration and harmony, not only in the physical body, in the emotional body, in the psychological body, and also in the ancestral spiritual bodies as well. And this, for us, we feel is essential, especially in the time that we live in, that many sicknesses, or ingulo ngengulo, keep arising. But then when we interface with them, we only look at the physical body for the causes. What is happening in the emotional plane? What is happening in the mind? But perhaps most interestingly, what is still held and remembered in the blood? What does the blood hold? And what does it keep sharing and sending from one generation to another? We have another maxim that says, ufuzo luyagqithisa, which essentially means that the information that moves through the bloodline, as time goes, it replicates, it becomes more complex. And so, therefore, we who are here now are essentially a kind of distillation of all the ancestral memory that has moved from the very beginning into this moment. And therefore, the elders would say, the intention and the purpose of those who are here now is actually to surpass the ancestors. That we must learn from them. And because we have learned from them, it is our onus to create a different reality, a better reality. So when we finally surrendered to this work, and would go as far as to say, this is really when I feel like my life began. I really could say this is when I started living, because now I'm no longer living as a truncated being that is only moving through my mental faculty and prowess. But I'm also deeply connected to my heart. I'm deeply connected to the earth. I'm deeply connected to my ancestors. And by virtue of that, I'm connected with all that is. And also perhaps to extend this understanding of the ancestor, that it is not only just the humanoid, but it is actually the plants. It is the mountains as well. It is the rivers. It is all the atoms and the elements, because they essentially make up this physical makeup of who and what we are, both in the material and the immaterial forms. So from this time, I've been really deeply learning what it means to listen, ukumamela, not only just with the ear, but with the whole body and with the whole spirit. And from this space of listening, we have gone into a deep appreciation of the technology of ngoma, which does not only speak to sound, but essentially speaks to the vibrational nature of the universe. That all things in creation vibrate, and therefore everything in the creation sings. Everything has a particular song, a particular rhythm. And it is this song, then, that keeps everything in the creation moving. As I'm here now speaking, as you are also here now breathing, the plants, the leaves, the wind, the breeze, everything is creating a symphony, and everything is creating a harmony. So in this cosmology, everything is understood as being interlinked and interconnected. That essentially there is no separation whatsoever. And to move in a space that is separated, it means that you are not connected, firstly with yourself, and also therefore with all that exists. At present, now moving away from the coding and maybe many other things that come with that space, we have been really drawn into technologies of sound, technologies of sounding, and also how the resonance of different instruments sits in different parts of our bodies, in the different organs, and also in different parts of our consciousness, and what those can do for us. An example, a drum. A drum is a very bassy tone. It's connected to this part of our body from the waist down, but also deeply connected to the earth. And Amagricha understand that our primal life force exists here in the waist. And this primal life force, when one is ready and it is activated, it moves here from the base of the spine. And this energy we understand as umbilini. Usually this energy is activated when one, perhaps, maybe when we move into the neurological side of understanding the body, when one feels activated, or when their sympathetic nervous system is so activated that the body begins to vibrate. And then this energy is activated from the spine and begins to move in a coiling form. Once this energy moves from the base of the spine to the crown, that is when then one is able to access not only just the connection to themselves, but with all things. Amagricha, or healers or diviners, work with this energy in order to be able to heal. What is curious for us as well is that the nature of working as Amagricha, maybe the term is anti-disciplinary, or perhaps it is a convergence of all disciplines, because Igricha isn't only just a healer, they're also an artist. They're also a community leader. But also Igricha is someone who deeply respects the environment, that they know that now these are my ancestors. So this term, or this way of being or of understanding, we feel is very, very essential because it returns us to unity and into oneness. And the essential nature of our work is rooted around that. This fundamental understanding of the body according to this cosmology, and also how the body holds the breath and how the breath sits in the body. And therefore, once the breath and the body are in unison, what is then made or created? So at times, we work with sound, but we also work with form or with shapes, be it carving wood, or be it working with the earth itself, to weave it, to work with it, to create different kinds of spaces. We also appreciate color as well, and the different frequencies that move within that space to create the material reality. So sound, shape, and color for us are very essential forms of working in creating a holistic experience for the appreciation, firstly, of oneself, but also the greater environment that we exist in. Tamago.
Thank you, Sisonke. Hello everyone. I'm a storyteller. I'm an African futuristic storyteller. So I'm inviting you all into a circle of conversation. So I'm not going to get up. I'm going to stay here and speak. And if at some point you feel like you want to interject, ask a question of what I'm doing in this moment, then I know that's a bit strange sometimes for a panel, but feel free to. I'm going to play an instrument that I'm learning because it's teaching me how to unlearn how I've been taught to learn. So to unlearn whiteness, which might be confusing for some folks, but that's where I am. If you were at the other panel, I said that I don't do anti-racism work anymore. That's where I came from. That's actually what led me to get a very competitive scholarship to do my PhD. It was actually, the proposal was an anti-racism PhD, and I was like, you know what? Let's do African futurism. Let's talk about building. So I'm unlearning whiteness in the process of doing this PhD, right? Because I come from, and I was raised in a space where survival meant becoming as white as possible. And so I'm speaking to everyone in this space, yeah? I'm speaking to all of us, regardless of where we're from, because whiteness is not a skin color. It's a culture and a way of being. And a lot of it is how we are taught in academic spaces, right? We have to let go of perfectionism. So this is why I'm coming to this instrument. I'm new to it. I'm very, very, very new to it. But it's called me, and it called me. I started off as a law student, so I know there were lawyers on this panel. I was like, okay, yo, we're all here. All the people who ran away. So my academic trajectory, I went to like a very highly respected law school. And I graduated, and I looked at my father, and I was like, yo, I'm gonna be a poet. And, you know, he's like the first one in his line, his lineage to go to university. And, you know, as black folks, we know what it means to have people graduating from institutions of power. The effort, the collective effort it takes for our families to gather the resources to make that even possible. So I'm standing on the shoulders of so much sacrifice. Because the conversation is always the same. I had to leave because the conversation is always the same, you know. I wanted to change the conversation. The conversation is always the same, and really it's about his hard work, because you see, hard work put food on the table and a roof over my head. So of course now it puzzles him when this expensively educated law school graduate of a daughter announces, hey, I'm going to support the family by writing books. He clears his throat. Fingers toying nervously with the cork in hand as he rotates it over and over and over again until you see stories spill out of him. You see his father dying. Come to visit him and talk about blood and responsibility of generations gone down in those gold mines and on those plantation fields, of my grandmother planting peanuts every single year in that marginal soil. Also, children could go to school and then never, ever, ever have to toil. You see, he says to me, they were the colonized generation. They were the ones who had to endure. So tell me, are you a lawyer yet? We will have this conversation 1,000 times a year for the next 1,000 years. So the story goes, because behind every poem is a story. The story is about a visit that my grandfather made to my father. My grandfather was working on a plantation, which is basically our ancestral home. And he went to the plantation owner and he asked for a raise because he decided that the best way to get his family out of the situation they were in was to raise enough money to, and he had only daughters at this time, mind you, to get all his children in school, teachers, nurses, you know the story, right? He was kicked off the plantation, and at that time we'd already had the Land Apportionment Act. And so he had to go to a reservation without any farm tools, no way to feed his family. So he did what every other person in southern Rhodesia at the time did who found themselves in that predicament. He caught the train to Johannesburg and he went to work in the mines. He eventually made his way to Cape Town, where he worked for a family as a domestic worker. And my grandfather would only come home at Christmas to see, I'm sorry, I'm gonna cry. Academia will give you the facts. Poetry will give you the feeling. And it's time we separated or stopped separating the facts from the feeling. Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Audre Lorde, I feel, therefore I am. Chimtengure. This is the word my people gave to the ox wagons that came and took, came and took. People, resources. Our ancestors are in the rocks. They're in the soil. I come from a people who believe that the earth is the mother. My grandfather was digging up his mother. So his family could survive. I was studying international economic development before I studied law. How do I participate in a system that killed my grandfather? When he came to visit my father, he was dying of a lung condition he contracted while working in the mines. Sound familiar? Still going on? Chimtengure. The ox wagons that came to take. The song is called Chimtengure. It's over 100 years old. But where is our knowledge in those academic spaces? Where is our way of making sense of the world? Chimtengure. That whole time when I was studying law was that I was getting caught up in whiteness, in a system that desensitizes you, in a culture that desensitizes you. Everybody's indigenous to somewhere. Everybody has people and ancestors who have connection to land as more than property. I studied international economic development. I studied economics, I studied law, and I came to poetry. I studied racism, I studied colonialism, I studied post-colonialism. I came back to the mira. So, they got jokes. Thank you. Thank you. So, when I left that path, I was scared. Right? What do we do when we let go of all we know? All that we've taught to be and become, the way that we've been taught to define success. Our whole self-esteem is rooted in a system of exploitation. What do we do when we refuse to be paralyzed, sorry for the ableist language, paralyzed by a sense of guilt and despair? How do we move to create and build new worlds where everybody thrives at the same time? So I found, I love saying this because people always think about the more interesting aspects of this book, but pleasure activism, right? Refusing to move from a place of victimhood and pain, and insisting on moving and creating from a place of joy, but not ignoring the pain. And so I came to this instrument. This is called a nyunga nyunga. My teacher's name is Hope Masike, and I'm still learning, so any mistakes of mine because I don't practice every day. Sorry, I can't see the notes. When I first started learning, I would beat myself up for getting the wrong note. And then my teacher gasped. Hope was like, she's like, okay. And then something happened in that moment. It was an unspoken something. And because I'd done so much anti-racism work, I was like, oh girl, check your perfectionism. Right? Which is why I love that we're in a space of rehearsal. Right? Check your perfectionism, girl. The creativity is in the mistake. The creativity is in the surrender. And academia will never teach you that. So many of us are in there going like this, beating ourselves up, trying to get it perfect, trying to get that perfect A, right? And there's reasons. I think it's because we're taken away from the land and we don't have a way to understand and know ourselves that is healthy. But Nimam Sasa is in the same mode as Chimtengura, when the ox wagons came to take. Nimam Sasa is much, much older, thousands of years older, and you can only understand both songs and conversation, the technology of sound, the wisdom of our ancestors, to know that our way out had to be defined within the same mode, right, as our entrapment. This is about the Msasa tree. Msasa is indigenous. I don't know if it's indigenous to parts of South Africa, what we call South Africa. But the Msasa tree is one that we use the wood from to create our homes. So when a person gets married, the whole village and community come together to build the new homestead. And this is a song. So we can choose how we come together. We can choose how we come together. So yeah, I'm on this PhD journey, which is very anti-disciplinary, because I refuse to discipline myself. I refuse to punish myself by talking and doing things that hurt myself. So I refuse to engage in topics and themes that are considered to be what I should be doing. And I find a way through, and I find a way to thrive by engaging with African futurism, tapping into the technologies of my ancestors, tapping into my joy, my stillness, my breath, refusing to be a perfectionist. So what that looks like is a practice-based PhD. I'm writing poetry, and I'm writing about the process of writing my poetry. And part of that is being on this journey and being with you all here, being with my family in Zimbabwe, hanging out with indigenous elders who've taught me, Aunt Ngawi Carolyn Briggs in Australia, my PhD supervisor. We just have a very different way of moving because we're 3 black women together in very white, violent spaces, and we choose to move with love and care, and we choose to risk and take risks to do something in a different way, and we're happy. But we're talking about the hard stuff. We're talking about the hard stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is this working? Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you. This was, both performances were beautiful and made me rethink a lot of what I had pinned down to to write about. It made me realize 2 things. One is actually, and that's part of my journey and why I'm here as well. Why I'm here, and while I'm in South Africa, I'm originally German, and I moved here last year. But all the things I can unlearn still and relearn, and all the things I can think about and think about differently. And parts of it we're going to touch on, perhaps, in what I'm going to say. And the other one is how great of a communicator emotion is, feeling. And in the legal profession, this hardly ever comes up. I mean, there's case law that has been around for many years, decades, centuries, that still shake us emotionally in a way. I guess we're in South Africa in a case law dominated jurisdiction, unlike in a lot of European countries where we only look at the black letter of the law, so to speak. So we don't have that many really important judgments where perhaps even judges could convey their personal opinions that then become law. We don't have that much. But yeah, emotion. And I had to put down a couple of examples, but I think it's so much more interesting to actually talk about what we've seen so far. And we talked about spirituality, about being one with everything around us, basically. And I wanted to talk about how we as humans interact and how we are supposed to interact with our environment, nature, whatever that is. There's so many terms that we use, and also again, Sisonke brought this up very early on. We use words, and we sometimes don't question what they actually mean. So what is nature compared to humans? We are certainly part of nature, but what is our natural state, so to speak? And I just came across I was back home in Germany last week to visit my parents, and I usually pick up books from my mum's little library, and I picked Brave New World from Aldous Huxley. I don't know if one of you has read it, and I've only just started. I'm on page 80 or something. And one of the, as far as I understand so far, one of the main pillars of that society that he basically draws out is that there are, again, different castes of people. And I believe it's the third caste, and they have been genetically modified. It's horrific, all of it. That's dystopia that he draws up. Genetically modified in a way that they don't enjoy being in nature, in green spaces. So he describes it in a way that they still use public transit. There is public transit. That's great, I guess, in that dystopia. They use public transit, but just to go to work. They don't use it to go to the park or to spend time outside. And he describes it in a way as if this was like genuinely against what is inherently human. So we enjoy being outside. We enjoy being in nature, whatever that means. We enjoy being with trees. We'll hear that symphony, so to speak. We enjoy that. And perhaps if you could show that poster, like artwork that I found just 2 weeks ago at one of the contemporary museums in Berlin, Neue Nationalgalerie, in one of the rooms that was dedicated to 70s, 80s art. It's German, but I'm going to translate it to you. But it's a strong image as far as you can see. So there's this group of men who lower a casket into a grave, and it says the Boden stirbt. So the soil is dying, the water is dying, the earth. So the air is dying, the forest is dying, the animals are dying, but hooray, we're alive, we live. So clearly it's very polemic, but can mean very various things to us. It was drawn up in 70s and still post-war Germany. Pollution was prevalent, and the environmental movement was very strong at that time, especially in the arts, also including Joseph Beuys, who I actually wanted to comment on, but maybe there's not enough time now. But yeah, so I saw this and I kept wondering. Yes, we live clearly, but how do we live? And also looking at that image for how much longer actually? How much longer can we sustain that lifestyle that we are living when everything around us is in demise? Maybe you can switch back to my profile because I don't like that image that much. So I kept wondering. So what can why is that like that? This is a question that haunts me. Why do we love being in like a healthy ecosystem? Still, we do all we can to destroy it. Not consciously, perhaps. We don't go to the next pond and we dump, I don't know, oil into the pond, but we kind of do, because we drive cars and we consume cosmetics that are made with oil, etc. So why do we do that? And one of the answers as a lawyer, I thought, is because we're allowed to, because we can do that, and no one actually tells us not to, except for us ourselves. And I'd like to give you a couple of examples how this is, to my opinion, ingrained in our laws, in our constitutions. And you will all have listened to what we discussed before. There's a bigger question about whether, who actually made the law? Why do we have statutory law? Is that actually is that how we all want to be governed? Well, how we want to govern ourselves? So, Section 7 of the Constitution of South Africa, I'm going to make this short because usually legal texts are super boring. Section 7 of the Constitution says, "This Bill of Rights is a cornerstone of democracy in South Africa. It enshrines the rights of all people in our country and affirms the democratic values of human dignity, equality and freedom." Section 11 says, "Everyone has the right to life." And Section 24, and now it becomes a bit different. "Everyone has the right to have the environment protected for the benefit of present and future generations through reasonable legislative and other measures," so not all of them, just the reasonable ones, "to prevent pollution and ecological degradation and to promote conservation." But again, am I to judge a not German constitution? So I'll give you an example of the German constitution. Article 2 says, "Every person shall have the right to life and physical integrity." A person is not defined in German law, but it's fairly clear that it's humans, because the Constitution also says animals are not objects. The provisions applicable to objects still apply to them accordingly, unless otherwise specified. So clearly they're not persons. So everything except for humans in both constitutions are not objects, or maybe under South African law are objects, but certainly not people. So we've drafted constitutions that are inherently for us, which is great. We're supposed to, this is how we decide to treat one another, but only other humans. So where has this brought us to when it comes to the environment? We've been putting humans first, that is clear, which then means other entities are losing out, other beings, other non-human species, but also other natural entities. Again, this has come up, river systems, forests, etc. So they will eventually always lose out, because we've decided in our constitutions that we basically serve the benefit, the health of humans. Since that poster that I showed was designed, we've, just a few numbers, I love numbers, even though I'm a lawyer. We've lost about 450 square kilometers. That's about, was it, a 30% of the size of what's South Africa? Of the Amazon rainforest cover, and we haven't accounted for fragmentation, so the splitting up of habitat. We've halted whaling mostly, which means that fin whales, for example, in the southern hemisphere their population has grown to 15,000 from about 5,000 in the 80s, down, however, from about 400,000 before whaling started. And we're losing a few species that have been hunted to almost extinction in that sense. So overall, the law has done some good things. We've been able to prohibit certain chemicals, etc. But it hasn't really done much systemically, so to speak. And again, this is because so far it seems we weren't willing to, perhaps. And change is incredibly complex, but if I look around, it feels like there's the will to change, and we've talked about different different approaches to personhood for many, many years in the legal context, in the ethical context. It comes up even in the writings of Aristotle. And it's like one of the options to perhaps consider is to extend personhood beyond humans, to make non-human species actual entities under the law that are equal, somewhat equal, at least elevated in their right compared to where they are now. And so in South Africa this has actually happened in 2017. The Constitutional Court found that animals actually have an intrinsic value as individuals. What exactly that means is unclear, but it's a first step. And by that being out there, questions around personhood and the breaking up our traditional perspective have actually become more mainstream. And other places have been taking it further. In New Zealand, for example, an entire river system has been awarded legal personhood. Other countries have followed suit: Canada, Ecuador, Peru, for different entities, natural entities. And there's always criticism about what that means, because it will be incredibly difficult to act on that in practice. Because we've touched on language, we don't really understand other entities who don't speak our language. We have trouble understanding different human languages. So how are we representing entities that now have personhood, perhaps, in a decision process? Will we be biased towards ourselves at the end of the day? But can that criticism actually can it hold? Is that valid in a system which has basically been unchanged for so long? And in a crisis, and I guess we are in a crisis, climate crisis and environmental crisis, we suffering from oceanic acidification. It's always a difficult word. Not my first language, English. I know it's hardly anyone's here. So why not actually look at non-traditional approaches to what it means to interact with our environment? And again, when I say traditional, it's probably something very, very different to what other people in the audience have in mind. And something, again, I've been wondering about a lot when I'm sitting here, but also beforehand. So what are we trying to? Where are we coming from? So I'm very much from a Western cultural tradition, and for me, it's sometimes really hard to understand how different concepts can work together. But I think this is exactly what we're doing here, and it's worth going those routes, because we are in a crisis, and we need radical solutions. And again, might be radical for me, but it might be absolutely normal for someone else. So back to the example that I never brought up, Joseph Beuys, my favorite German artist. He's not, but he's from my hometown. I don't know if you're acquainted with him. He, for the Documenta 7, initiated a project where he started planting trees in a public space in Germany, in Kassel actually, where the exhibition was happening. And he wanted to plant 7,000 oak trees, and the oak tree is very particular to German culture. 7,000 oak trees from 1982 to 1987. And this was met with tremendous backlash, protests. People went took it to the streets because someone was planting trees, which is hilarious in a way. But in a deeply regulated public space, this is what happens, and this is where also as a great example, the law can be a great hindrance to societal change. So maybe today this is one of the first trees that we plant, and we'll see each other in 5 years. Thank you.
Molweni. Today is World Mother Tongue Day, and yesterday we commemorated the World Day of Social Justice. So today I'll be very brief. I know it's after 4 on a Friday. I would rather be sipping some delicious wine from the wine farms around here. So I'll be very brief so that we can engage in conversation and that we can also engage in the wine very soon. Right, I accepted the invitation not just because Andy, Kulekani, and Franz are my friends, but also this talk program / INKUNDLA deeply resonated with me as a lawyer, because in Xhosa we call court INKUNDLA yamatyala. And surprisingly, when my fellow panelists started watu ungumtande, I was like, wow, because nam ndingumtande. And now we've turned this to INKUNDLA yamantande. Sizawuxoxa amatyala wamantande. But let me not digress and get down to it. Today I want to talk to you about something that's very dear to my heart, and I would like to believe that it's also dear to your heart. Social justice and student debt. Every year around this time in South Africa, we find ourselves scrambling as if we didn't know that the lion is gonna chase us. Every year we find ourselves across the nation with students sleeping outside, without food, without accommodation, without place to study. Not because they are not deserving. Actually, they are very much deserving to be there. They wouldn't have been in front of those stairs if they didn't have or didn't qualify academically. But there's only one reason why they are not in class. It's the social injustice of financial barrier. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet, they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerted citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world." Was she not correct? I thought I would stay away from the traditional lawyer style of telling you about what the Constitution says and which section says this. I think my colleague Philip has done a brilliant job, and I'm sure you are convinced that social justice is something we should all care about. But have we taken responsibility for it? And what does it actually mean? If we are to define social justice, simply put, social justice is concerned about fairness to all, amongst groups, within groups, amongst societies. So if we were to be a society here in this room, social justice would dictate that we treat each other fairly, without discrimination. And it started as a philosophical concept. It has now become a legal concept. But how do we treat each other fairly in a society? What John Rawls says is that it requires us to step away whenever we're about to make a decision. we step away from the potential of wanting to gain benefit from that decision. Because if there's a potential of us gaining a benefit, we will choose a decision that will advantage people who look like us, who sound like us, who pray like us, who sex like us. But if we're to step away from that, as difficult as it might be, we might just find a solution that works for everybody. But can we really do that? Can I, as a queer man, step away as I'm about to make a decision and say, I'm now a neutral person? I can't. But what does that then require? Is that I'm aware of my conscious and unconscious biases. As a man, as a queer man, I probably would tend to make a decision that's going to advantage the group. But if I'm conscious about it, I can then catch myself and ask myself the question, what is the fair solution in this situation? And of course, you know that different situations require different solutions. But social justice is also rooted in Ubuntu. I am because you are. I recognize your humanity. I'm not treating you differently to what I would have treated myself, because I recognize that you too are human. And if we're to practice that, I don't have a doubt in my mind that some of those students would not be where they slept last night. They would have had food, they would have had accommodation, and they would have been in class yesterday on World Day of Social Justice. But they were not. They were unshowered, unfed, and not being educated while others were. This is happening about 3.8 kilometers from where we are. But whose responsibility is it? Whose responsibility is it that 30 years into constitutional democracy, social justice still lies at a distant dream? Whose responsibility is it that things have not turned out the way we had hoped it will? I am sure the drafters of the constitutions that insisted that social justice must be a foundational value did not imagine that 30 years later, black African women would still be at the bottom of the poverty line. They would have not imagined the harrowing stats around gender-based violence. Unemployment sits at 32.9%. About 11 million South Africans are dependent on the social relief distress grant. About over 1 million students rely on the very dysfunctional NSFAS. Before you accuse me of being a prophet of doom, I want to answer the question on whose responsibility is it to make social justice real. Unfortunately, I'm looking at the people who are responsible to make social justice real. It is you, it is I, it is us. And we can do this in different ways. But I think we have to start by being conscious, demonstrably aware that we live in the world's most unequal society. As we make decisions, as we go about our lives, we have to carry that burden. I know you are so probably excited that I'm going to get to the part where I'm saying it's government's job. It's not. Unfortunately, it's not. Because who's government, by the way? We are government. We are government by advising the elected officials. We are government by coming up with solutions and saying, here's a model that has worked elsewhere. Given our context and our history, can it work here? We are in INKUNDLA right now, which is a perfect, brilliant concept. And the president has spoken about the national dialogue, which I don't know what's holding him from implementing it. As much as we are active in this INKUNDLA, we have to be active in that national dialogue. And my plea to you today is that you are conscious about the social injustice around you and that you do something about it. For example, I'm a member of a group and we do umgazato. I don't know who in the room knows what is ukugazata. Umgazato is to pull together. Those who play golf would know that after a long day on the field, you'd want to go get some beer and whiskey. So if I don't have enough to get the bottle of whiskey, and Philip's got some cash, we can put together, we can gazat together and get the bottle of whiskey. So I think we should start gazetting for student debt. Because if we're going to wait for NSFAS, the village is going to burn to the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. And thank you so much, Kanyisile and Mike, for bringing all these different perspectives together. I mean, it was so good. I mean, I have so much on my mind. But I'll pick your brains a bit later because we don't have a lot of time. I just thought we'd just open this up straight up to the audience. So does anyone have any questions you'd like to ask the panelists?
Thank you all. I'm just wondering if there are any of the other panelists who are here from before, because my question sort of spans the two, but I'm sure that you can all answer it as well. We've been sitting here since 1 o'clock, and I think we've forgotten that we have bodies. I think we've forgotten that we actually need a myriad of senses in order to be free, in order to be relational human beings, sovereign human beings. And I've been inspired and I've been taken beyond what I feel as an artist I can tune into, and it has been so far. Bazinzile has, I talked to Kanyazile, I said it's a form of worship I feel that we're doing here in the best way. And I would say I'm feeling a little angry now. I feel that we haven't been given enough space to actually feel through. There's a lot of talk about feeling, there's a lot of talk about emotions, and I just feel that sometimes we have to also be recognized to be beings that need a little bit of toing and froing. And I think that when we were asked the question, where do we go from here? And someone said beautifully, what do you mean by here? And I think we've been in a deeply dialoguing, and that has felt very, very expansive and regenerative. But I just do feel that if we're talking about new forms of curating and care, we need to also be aware of all of our emotional needs and our psychological needs. So I guess the question I'm asking is, and Philip, you brought it up, you actually used the word emotion. I think if we haven't been feeling emotional through all the extraordinary experiences and stupendous presentations that we've had here, which are, I feel, so kind of metaphysical and, you know, they're grounded, and yet we've sort of, I don't know, something suddenly became missing, and I think it's something to do with the body. It's something to do with the body in this space. Our bodies have been trapped in these chairs for too long. And in a way, we've been enticed by beautiful music, beautiful, extraordinary, depthful realities of what it means to be all at one and interconnected. And yet, somewhere, something is missing. I'm asking you to please find some way of helping me understand what we can bring into a space like this that actually relates to our human-bodiedness and our human-centeredness and our human-heartedness. So, to all of you, thank you so much. Our emotional beings.
Maybe we can do the Q&A outside.
Osombele.
I don't have a question, but I guess I'll come up with something. To maybe speak to you about like the sense of feeling. I think it's already happening. Maybe it's happening silently. In the previous panel, they did mention that what kills us is the silence. Mm-hmm. Just sitting here, I mean, I am surrounded by amazing people and I feel very held by it, but my body feels the breath of tension that has come out from the panel, and I've had to breathe it in, and how my body has consumed it is that I have experienced the tension through facial tics, and I'm just like, oh, what's going on there? You know, so there is a sense of feeling that's happening, but maybe there isn't a release, because we're receiving all of this valuable information that also lives within our bodies and within our histories. For a long time, Black people, even women actually, were not considered human or did not have personhood. They were considered to be part of cattle and stock, livestock rather. And so we see the impacts of that as time goes by, and we have new legislations that suddenly give us this sense of you are a being, you are important, you are alive. But we've always been alive. And so how do we then harness that? So I really appreciate how Sister Zaizai and Sisonke have brought back the life, the breathwork within us that is the release, that is the sigh, that is the acknowledgement that we are beings that have always been present. And it doesn't need to be given to us legislatively. And with regards to the students, the gazetting thing, I'm just like, we're taxpayers. Isn't that gazetting in a sense? But also, when Black life has been put at an expense of so many violences, how is it that we have to continue to give more when our children should be getting free education and they should be getting all these resources that is a part of our land? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a question. I just want to respond maybe in a way. And I think it's also something that's been triggered by quite a few of the talks that I've listened yesterday and today, this brings me into a difficult space because I sit with duality of I want to also respect my ancestors, but at the same time, I'm so angry at them for what they've done. And I have to hold both of those things in my soul and sit here, and that's what's making me feel uncomfortable. And I want to thank you for bringing me to that space. Thank you.
Mama, enkosi kakhulu. Perhaps really your response ties into Mama what she was saying. And this for me as well, I was like, is this anger actually coming from what is here, or perhaps something within you is being activated? And perhaps this feeling of feeling trapped. You mentioned the word sovereignty as a sovereign being aware of your own needs, to take that step that, hey, I feel like I've had information overload now. How do I step out and take a breath? And if I need to return, to return. So we feel also perhaps this is a powerful practice to engage in. Utata did mention that even the conceptualization of the space as INKUNDLA. INKUNDLA, in at times, even though it is grounded, but it is an intense space. It is a difficult space that we must collectively allow ourselves to go through. And it is in the acknowledging, and perhaps now we are speaking with you, Mama, acknowledging and accepting the duality, accepting what is, and that's the first step of the healing. Also, sitting here, we're not saying that our ancestors are also perfect. There were many things that they have done that still sits in our bodies, that still sits in our blood. But if we do not accept what has been, then we can't transform that energy. Then we can't shift that energy. Presence is the first key, and you're doing it so well, Mama. Thank you for being present through it all and acknowledging that this is actually what is flowing in this moment, and this really is the step where the transformation happens. And this is not only just for you, it's for all of us, for all humanity, for all the bloodlines, that we must all acknowledge what has happened before. All the pains and all the traumas that we are still carrying, that we are holding now, and potentially, if we do not address them or redress the wound, we have the potential of projecting them into the future. So it is important that we enter the spaces that are uncomfortable, but it is the posture of gentleness, it is the posture of softness that allows us to go through that process and not fight and not react, but instead, as Ausi had said, to surrender into it. And it is in the surrender that the letting go begins to happen. But the letting go isn't so much as saying that we are forgetting, that now these things, we are throwing them away, but instead it is an integration. From the awareness into the acknowledgement, from the acknowledgement into the surrender of what is, and once we are into the space of the surrender, into the letting go. Because now we are no longer holding it in our bodies. But if we look at it, and I think so many people have mentioned it so beautifully, friction. Essentially, this is what we are sensing and what we're feeling. And friction is so key to the creative process. We need the opposition at times. We need the duality. There's many people who have come up with many ideas, but this is where the synthesis begins to happen. And perhaps then this process we are all collectively in is finding a way of synthesizing. And of course, it doesn't only end here. We still have to process. We still have to digest. And perhaps then the stepping out of this space, being into the greater nature, is the integration of all that has been learned and also been processed. Perhaps it can happen for a lifetime, but what is important is that we are taking the steps. Tsamako.
I wanted to answer her.
You're talking about the space. I'm going to stand up. And I'm speaking to my, you. You be an example. There's something that I've had, and this is about how connected we are. I'm not going to explain it, but I'll do it. And unfortunately, I'm going to say it in English, because that is the language we can all connect with. My name is Namobiru Chirumira. I'm a daughter of Bukko, who is lying in his resting place in Muduma, Kampala, Uganda. I'm a granddaughter of Bagubye, who is lying in his resting place in Muduma, Kampala, Uganda. I'm a granddaughter of Bagubye, who is lying in Muduma, Kampala, Uganda. I'm of the Langfish clan called Imamba. I'm a Muganda. I'm Omuntu. Does that sound familiar to you? You didn't teach it to me, you didn't tell it to me. It is part of my lineage. And we do it every time. We call it walk like a person, tambula ng'omuntu. Because you are able to trace your lineage, where you come from. And I'm so happy that I've heard you say it. I'm so happy that, where is she? She's not here. Huh? Kanyesile. She did it, and I was so, this is how alive that we are, even though we are sitting in one place, but something happens to us that we learn to do something, and we recognize certain things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. This was a really special experience for me to hear what you all offered, so thank you. I just have two thoughts and comments. One, I am also very angry what your ancestors did. And I understand that my well-being and my wishes and ambition for the transformation of our world requires me to pass through that. And that's all of our work. And thank you for reminding me about how we are all connected in that, because we've all been injured. And this was a thought that occurred to me. Philip, thank you for the data and the language, and I stuck with you. And when you were talking about the laws around nature benefit humans, and I kept remembering, experiences that I've had with indigenous folks and even us, that it's actually not in the interest of all humans. And it's actually in opposition to the interests of humans. So it's in the interest of maybe business and profit. And so I think I just wanted to bring that. I know that you didn't have enough time to say it, but I had to. Thank you.
Should I? All right. I just wanted to respond. What's your name? Stembile. You asked a very good question that shouldn't, and you used the word, our kids be benefiting from free education and all of that. I think that's a brilliant question, but my answer to that, this year we'll be commemorating 70 years of the Freedom Charter. And that Freedom Charter was supposed to tell us about the principles for a free and democratic South Africa. And there it says, the doors of learning and culture shall be opened. And we interpret that to mean free and equal education. But while we wait for that dream students are dying, literally. Families are perishing, literally. Because inequality kills, right? So if we're going to say, no, we're going to fight for the implementation of the Constitution and the change of systems, which is what social justice is about. It's about the change of systems so that they're fair. Those take time. Those take a hell of a lot of time. But we can't let those students die in the meantime. So that's why we need to plug the gap with social assistance in the meantime.
And does taxes not do that in the spirit of Gazata?
You're pushing me to the politics side, and I didn't want to talk about government today. I mean, we couldn't even have a budget speech just 2 days ago. That tells you the state of our country 30 years into democracy. And you want me to talk about corruption, and you want me to talk about service delivery and how inefficient and ineffective those are. But my point remains that students are dying, literally.
Thank you. I took notes on my phone. I'm not on WhatsApp. So thank you for all the questions. I have just a couple of comments. And starting with the last one. So yes, absolutely. I think we have to think about our voice in how we commune, like, I don't know, how we raise our voice in the legislative process. And so it's a very, very difficult question to ask, and maybe we won't go too much into government or politics. But yes, so constitutions and our law are made by us at the end of the day, right? By individuals who cast a vote. So in the perfect world, this should, trickle through into the laws that we make. Oftentimes it's not the case, and I guess we have to ask ourselves why that is the case, and why maybe we as the people who can vote, why we let this happen. And then a couple of other things, and I'm really grateful for some of the remarks. With the first question, thank you. You mentioned feeling, and I thought about that too. And then my initial thought was, well, I'll take it home, and then I'm going to think about it. Think about what we've heard. I'm going to think about how I'm going to feel tomorrow, maybe next week. That this is my immediate reaction to a question about feelings is, I guess, very telling. And then circling back to unlearning, I think that's a big task certainly for me, maybe for other people too. And that tells us a lot about how slow change will be, but how hopefully it is happening in many ways.
Sister Za?
Thank you all for your comments and your questions. So I'll try to address the one about feeling and sort of like being in a space where you feel trapped. I think discomfort is often part of this, a huge part of this kind of work, and I think especially for white-bodied folks, because the systems are created. I don't like doing anti-racism teaching, but here we go. The systems are created to make you feel comfortable all the time. So when you come across information sometimes that pushes you to your edge, it can make you feel very uncomfortable in your body. Maybe not consciously, but things come up for you. Our ancestors are in us and they're with us, right? We all have ancestors who've done some shady stuff. I've got shady ancestors. I choose not to work with them, right? I choose to learn from them, but I choose not to work with them. That means I have to sit with what they've done as well, though. The unlearning. So I think it's a great question about format. And I think there's been great work done to shake up the panel format, you know, like presentation format. But there's only so much you can do in a space that's already built so that we're apparently the experts here. I mean, I was just like really enjoying listening to you all as well. But I think you can't do much when a space is already set that way. I mean, there are folks here who do great work in that regard. I was at the talks yesterday and, you know, kind of saw that happening, where there might be more sort of like engagement beforehand, but I don't want to speak. Maybe the folks who do that can speak and say something to that, because it's not really my forte. It's just something that I see and I go, oh yeah, that's quite beautiful. Maybe it's because you just feel like you're a receptacle as opposed to a generator, a co-generator of knowledge of information. So maybe you're feeling trapped because you're like, oh, I want to say, can't. So I think that's all normal, but we're working in systems. This is part of yesterday's chat. Amy Rose might speak to it, but like speaking to how, yeah, like we're in conversation together, which is why I'm a storyteller. I'm not going to get up to the lectern. I can't lecture you. We're in conversation. Feel free to interject if you want to. Maybe what I could have added onto that to take personal responsibility is to say, if you need to get up, if it's too much, because there's a lot, can get heavy, get up. I'm not going to take offense, because we're coached that when we're in a performance space, we have to sit still and behave. It's like, but then if you're in a indigenous African people are indigenous. If you're in an indigenous context, we shout at the person who's, you know, we get up and we sing, or we might like shove them off the stage and grab the mic. Like, so there's a lot of activity, you know what I'm saying? So this is also a colonizing. It's a and it's the rehearsal, right? We're in a rehearsal for breathing, so it's good to know those things.
Thank you so much. I just have just one thought in terms of just listening to all of you that I would love you to reflect on. So Kanisa and Sister Zai, you spoke, I mean, I think a lot about the ancestral subconscious that you spoke about and the suppression of it, right? And so we talk a lot about unlearning, but there's a lot of relearning, right? Because when you even talk about how language, indigenous and black cultures, environmentalism is in your language, or was, right? So we hear the stories we were told, you can see in relation to the names of places, right? But dispossession and a loss of language, which comes with the colonial intrusion, also comes along with that environmental sort of like breakdown. And so on the one hand, just in relation to relearning, right? So the importance of that, and I suppose that's part of futurism as well, right? What going back while we move forward. But there was a point where we were considered as one, right? So it's not like we're moving to a future we don't know. There was a point when we understood, right? And just then again, talking about that, how are we able to think about the personhood then of these other elements when fundamentally there isn't an alignment around the personhood of people, right? And so, for example, everything we see right now, whether it is what's happening, you know, in DRC or Sudan, etc., that is harmful to the environment. What's happening in Palestine is harmful to the environment, right? So how do we ever get to a point where we can think about this personhood outside of the human bodies where we don't see people as human? So those are just my I just feel like, just thoughts on, are these things not all conversations we need to be having all at the same time? I don't know what your thoughts are, yeah. Even in relation to resources, I mean, there should be enough for everyone. There should be enough food, you know, there should be enough for everyone, for students. So how do we bring all these thoughts together? But what are your thoughts on all these converging aspects of the thoughts you brought? Yeah.
Well, there's a concept, I'm trying to remember the theorist's name, but she's a Caribbean writer, theorist, multidisciplinary thinker, incredible. and has a theory called Man 1 and Man 2. Man 1 is kind of like the European Enlightenment person, which is the personhood we find in law. Man 2 would be more of like the indigenous concept of personhood, which is what we're talking about, the interconnectedness of us. And so like some of these concepts actually do need to emerge from an indigenous understanding of the world. And so that's where the unlearning comes from and the relearning of how you be, right? How you be in connection to all. So there's, and that was my challenge with law as well, I think, coming from I was raised by my grandmother, who was born in like the early 1900s. So I have a consciousness from that person, right? That is incongruous to a lot of what I was learning in a sort of like modernity. This is what it means to be the reasonable, rational man, and that's what you find in law. That's how we build our systems of government as we've been handed them now. So that's what I was unpacking with international economic development. I was like, oh, are we imagining anything different? Or are we just like repeating the same thing over again? There's reform and there's revolution, huh? And people think revolution is like, oh, it's a war. No, it's children playing outside and feeling safe and everybody having enough to eat and us connected to everything and having time for pleasure and for joy. So that's how I see it. Like we have and I wish I could remember this person's name. I'll remember one day, so just get in touch. I'll remember, then I'll...
What we're feeling perhaps as a way of orientation is maybe a returning to the appreciation of this particular geographic region we're in as the source of humanity, as the source of culture, whether we call it material culture, spiritual culture, whatever it is, but really looking at the Southern African region, and we can extend it into the whole continent, the source of ideas, the source of culture, the source of understanding, and how this understanding over time has moved through the whole continent, and also through the whole planet. So-called Western philosophy and the whole Western way of seeing is but an extrapolation of African ideas. So much of our ancestors' ideas and conceptions have been stolen, distorted, reconfigured, and used in different ways. And this is what this posture of Western modernity dresses itself as. But if we don't understand the source, and perhaps maybe this was the message for me during that time of distress, that we must connect to the roots. And perhaps this is the unlearning. But what is interesting for me, beyond these grander ideas and these grander themes, is moving and zooming into you as the being now, as the first source. Yes, all the grander systems are existing, right? But it is actually us who are maintaining them and are proponents of them. And so if we return to self, we would say in isiXhosa, to uqobo, the real self, not the self that has been configured by all these disciplinary ways of seeing and understanding. If we can allow ourselves to go through the turbulence of what that brings as well, because many of us have lost their mind in that process, or other people have lost touch with reality because one reality imposes itself on an already existing reality. But what is curious for us is, how can you within your own self tap into your own bloodline, into the information that streams through you, information that has moved through all of the people that you have come from. Yes, we are aware of some of the things that are pleasant and some of the things that are pleasant, but there is information there that is unique, that moves through your bloodline. And it is the information that is needed in this time. So how can we allow ourselves to enter that space? And it is only us, each one of us can do it for ourselves, not the next person can't do it for you. So you must address the wounds that exist in your family line, in your community, and once you are able to enter that space and into the transmutation, you bring the solutions. We bring the medicine. We would call it that, sitting amayeza. Because in this process, there's the acknowledgement of the ailment or the disharmony, and then the return or the sankofa to retrieve that which has always been known. And once we bring it into this space, it brings the solutions that we need. Because all of us sitting here and we are seeing many things playing themselves out in the planet, and it's been centuries, people have been saying this paradigm is crumbling. So many theorists have come and gone, making note that this particular paradigm is falling apart. But where are we going to find the solutions? Others would say they are within. They're in the blood, they're in the DNA. We feel the information is still sitting there. But then we must take the journey to retrieve. And once we bring that, the uniqueness that's flowing through me, that's flowing through you, that's flowing through everyone in this space. And when we bring all of those things into the circle, already without us having to think about the systems that are outside of us, but because that which is internal is no longer operating with this operating system, then it changes. Tamago.
Let me introduce my brother Siddhartha Mita, who has been very, very important for us in conceptualizing the Triennale. Actually, we've been thinking together with Kanyisile and him. We've been working together since the first Triennale in 2020, and he's here just going to contextualize what we have here today and give us also some sort of like an outro before we close. Thank you.
I tried to slip out of it this time because what we've heard is so rich, and it has been a long afternoon. But Brother Tigere insisted. Insistence is good. Max Roach, Abby Lincoln, we insist. So let me respond and honor that. Some of you may have been here for the talks program yesterday. For those of us who've been here through all 4 sessions, it's been extraordinarily rich, and I feel great gratitude to Tigere and Kanyisile, and of course the organizers and everybody, the Triennale, to have put this together. As I said yesterday, and I won't go over it again, but just in a nutshell, or to adapt something I said yesterday, this morning, just like yesterday morning and previous mornings, I woke up to violence. I woke up to abundance. I woke up to violence. I looked at my phone, which is violent. I looked through the commercial and corporatized internet, which is violent. I looked through it at what the dominant media was filtering to me, which is violent. I look towards the country of which I hold a passport and where I live primarily and where I pay taxes and vote, and was once again shocked by yet another round of extraordinary violence as fascist, racist extremists animated by megalomaniac libertarian ideas do as much violence as they can in the window that they have found for it to a system, a civic system, whatever its perfections or imperfections, so that they can demolish the bits that they don't like and take over and repurpose and privatize the bits that they do like. I looked at the violence in the world, the annihilation of Gaza, the historic violence committed on Palestine and our Palestinian brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts, grandparents. And of course, all the other violences that we then read together once we start stitching. The violence of Cape Town, where I woke up this morning, on the waterfront. I won't belabor it. And the abundance of the Western Cape in high summer, the abundance of a serious art event convening people with earnestness, diversity of practice, of method, of form, a very, very, very strong curatorial concept or methodology, bazinzile, breath, rehearsal, the obligations that come with that, but also the permissions that we give each other in that. Think about violence and abundance, violence and abundance, violence and abundance, abundance because of violence, abundance despite violence, abundance beyond violence, and so on. Yesterday, the first panel dealt in a nutshell with museum and curatorial practices. The second panel allowed us to hear from individual artists in the show. As we went through those, we got to thinking about enclosures, the enclosure of the biennial and triennial, the enclosure of the museum, the enclosure of the plantation, the enclosure of the nation state, etc. Porosity, and how the artistic practice or the art worker practice in a very broad sense, which all of us are here, including the lawyers, including everybody, works around or with that porosity, must live inside of it and outside of it at once, what kinds of consistencies, what kinds of aspirations we have to come out of the enclosure. Can we work out of some set of enclosures without trying to work out of other sets of enclosures? Is that even an ethical position? What can we do now? Today, we had music, and we had spirit. We had them yesterday too, but today they were frontal. They were in the foreground. We had not answers, but methods, paths. And so I am renewed now in the same feeling I was renewed with yesterday at the end of the session, but now even more so thanks to this iteration and this coming in of additional levels and dimensions. I likened it yesterday to a house music track where different things start coming in, and after a certain while, you just are, a beautiful totality has formed and you didn't even notice it happening. Towards gratefulness and towards a sense of possibility. And I'm an outsider. I'll say briefly for the other people here who are not South African, whatever it means to be South African in the nation state, but for those of us who are not, whatever that is, let us continue to listen very, 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 very deeply and carefully to this country in all of its aspects. Since the freedom struggle, and me being just another mixed race, international, last dregs of third worldism, college student in the United States in the late 1980s, divestment, apartheid, South Africa has kept me sharp or sharpened me long before I even started to visit here. Years later, it continues to sharpen me, but in ways that require no complacency, constant recalculation, constant re-listening. Is it not also the fact that the freedom struggle everywhere, but let's say here, because this is where we are right now, continues? It may not take the form of what history calls the struggle or the freedom struggle, and yet the struggle for freedom here and everywhere else in the world, for the reasons I just discussed, could not be sharper right now. Those methods, those paths, we receive something here, and we can also look where we are in our respective places. Brazil, my sister Aline, United States, other places, and continue this exchange in all these forms where cultural exchange and art allow us to communicate in ways that other practices, my sisters, I studied political economy of development at a high level, and I got out of there too. But as you know, nothing is wasted, right? Nothing is wasted. It comes back in another way. So that's for us who are not of here. But for all of us, thank you for this provisional moment, this rehearsal. Nothing that happened here is final. Nothing that happened here can be gloated about, that something was achieved here. Even the paradoxes can't be gloated about. The work continues, and yet the abundance of all of us together in this place is intense and beautiful. So what I would say, on the website it says that I'd offer a closing statement, but I just said something about enclosures. We're not closing any statements at all. We're only opening, and we're continuing to open what is being opened here for us. So if you'll allow me to say Nkosi, if you'll allow me to say Danke, if you'll allow me to say the struggle continues, a luta continua. Thank you.
Thank you.